If I was in the office and going out to lunch, I'd probably be looking for a good pad thai.
Look, my favorite has always been Thai curries,
I have really specific feelings on what is and is not lunch food and the appropriate size of a lunch.
For lunch, I often like to have a salad because then I actually feel good in the afternoon. If I eat something too heavy, then I get really sleepy in the afternoon.
I'm fortunate. I have a wife that is a brilliant business partner that makes amazing lunches.
I think pasta, any type of pasta, it's like my favorite thing to eat with bread. Yes.
I have this turkey and bacon sandwich. Yum, yum.
The knowledge exchange for resilience is really about setting up mechanisms in which we can learn from each other and exchange knowledge for improving the community as a whole. A hunch lunch is the introductory level of a knowledge exchange. The idea is that it isn't a deep dive into it isn't a deep dive into long-term partnerships, but it's really this first introductory level of being able to say, hey, there's something that I have experienced. I have a hunch about something, and it's about sharing that idea with other people who might be interested in and have their own hunches.
The area that I study in relation to resilience is that economic systems seem to face this trade-off, which is between productivity or economic efficiency and susceptibility to shocks. Just last week, I got some exciting data from the European Center for Disease Control, I believe is the governing body in the EU that's sort of like our CDC. They published some infection rates on a daily basis for all countries in Europe. And when I plot that versus the GDP per capita of each country in Europe, just before the COVID crisis hit, there's a really strong linear relationship. The countries that are the most productive, advanced, and have the highest GDP had also the highest infection rates. And so it tells me that cities might not be aware of that trade-off. And even if they are aware, they may not have the tools yet to help them understand that trade-off and to find those sweet spot industries that both enhance resilience and enhance productivity.
So in January and February, when these things started to happen, you talk about hunch, I was talking to a few media publications and radio and TV, and they were saying, what's going on? What's going on with the shortage? Somehow or the other, we are not seeing toilet paper. So at that point of time, I explained to them that there are two supply chains. One is a consumer supply chain, other is a business supply chain. The business supply chain is shut down. So the question was, why can't we move those products, because the business supply chain has been shut down, those toilet papers over to the grocery stores? And so the answer was that the quality of the toilet paper, the packaging for a business is very different than what we get in our houses. So in this is a very interesting situation in which not only the supply got constricted, but the demand also got constricted. People were not buying. What everybody was advising small businesses was buy more inventory. China is shut down. So those poor guys ended up buying inventory, but people were not buying. So their working capital was into the inventory and they couldn't pay their employees, and you saw a huge amount of layoff. So most of the pain that you're seeing is from a small business.
The changes were happening faster than people could effectively react to. That went into almost a settling in, like this is, now we're just going to wait for it to be over. I'm not going to keep changing. The pandemic will wear itself out. The civil unrest will ease, and that did not happen. So when the civil unrest continued, if not escalated, a group of business owners, or I guess a segment of the small business community, realized that what they needed to do was develop their own plan.
we've been manufacturing our own personal protective equipment, for face masks and hand sanitizer. I know a lot of other institutions have been able to ramp up into that space as well. And, and not just for themselves, but providing, benefits to the state and communities and first responders. And so I think it's been really great seeing that response, and it's taught us a little something about kind of how we all can come together in a trying time.
People are choosing brands that are also doing something community-based. So, for example, Hy-Vee is a Midwest grocer. They started to do free groceries for their expecting mothers, at-risk populations, and senior citizens during the peak of COVID. So these are the types of solutions or things that some retailers are putting in place.
Now, it's important to remember in Arizona, our economy never entirely closed. Manufacturing in Arizona did not close. Aerospace did not close. The visible parts of our economy, whether it be tourism or education, those parts of our economy clearly closed down.
And I think what that speaks to is you always need to have a diverse economic base. And I think over time, Arizona has been getting a lot better in terms of that diversity of industry.
And we had a sort of a built-in resiliency and a built-in opportunity to come out faster because of just the way that our economy is structured in Arizona.
And one of the interesting benefits that I think that you can't exactly plan on explicitly, but that you get when you have a diverse economic base is the different synergies that arise between these industries.
We're choosing to do more e-commerce in a sense because, it's safety, it's less travel, it's, we can't travel in groups anymore.
With our habit of being scared, we will nest and we will try to shop locally. So the local economy, the local retail area, and our neighborhood shops will see a growth while people will not go to the malls.
You'll see a little bit of a disappearing of brick and mortar, but those retailers that are converging their online footprint and their brick and mortar footprint are going to continue to be very successful. We're definitely seeing a reduction in spending by the consumers. We're only spending on things that we absolutely need.
It'll be surprising for a lot of people to know that Walmart and Targets were reporting that the sales of the tops had increased dramatically than sales of bottoms. On the flip side of it, because we are in this nesting mode, you see companies like Costco and Lowe's, Home Depot, they have run out of lumber. We are building our decks, do-it-yourself projects, and literally we have run out of lumber in these shops.
There are motorhome businesses that are up 1,600%. We saw the furniture business go up 400%.
All along for the last 20 years, we've seen about a 1% growth rate per year in e-commerce retail. So this goes back to 2009, but you can see that they went from about 5.5% to about 16% in 10 years. And then all of a sudden we jumped 10 years of growth in the last 10 months, essentially. This is our new normal. So what that has done is, if a business wasn't ready to respond to the consumer's demand to easily find products, purchase products, return products online, they're most likely failing or being left behind. Still, 30% of all retail being done online is not the majority, obviously. So we're still, relying on brick and mortar for the vast majority of our retail consumption. So that means we'll still continue to see that traditional retail channel, but just it's going to look different.
Unfortunately, we are going to see a lot of robotic process automation in our factories, in our warehouses, just because companies don't want to be reliant on people who can get sick. It's a double-edged sword. You're going to let go of a lot of people, but you will ensure that your processing plants are working.
My hunch is that the combined crises of COVID and the protests in the wake of George Floyd murder revealed fractures in the American economy and the American social fabric, which are probably going to be very hard to cover up again. And in terms of what that means for a local economy like Phoenix's, but also in terms of the national economy, I'd say that the thing that links them is an overinvestment in sectors of the economy which assume that our well-being is being taken care of elsewhere. But what we have is a situation where that well-being is not being taken care of anymore. And what you've seen are two significant negative consequences of that. In the case of the Black Lives Matter protests, what we're seeing is more and more people that don't have access to the institutions they need to take care of themselves and be full participants in American economic and political life, who are being dealt with violence. As more and more people are excluded from those institutions, we respond with violence and incarceration as a method of social control. And the second thing that we're seeing is an inability to respond to other major crises that are not economic. So in this case, COVID-19. And so, you know, some people have insurance, and that's great until the hospital you go to has a full ICU, which happened in Phoenix.
Our data set clearly suggests that healthcare and social assistance, and this is the sector that is kind of the worst hit.
But you know what the root of that problem is, a financing model for healthcare and hospitals in particular, which makes them rely upon marketing elective surgeries as the basis for supporting the rest of the hospital's operations. And what COVID has revealed is that's a problem when you have a major healthcare crisis.
You know, healthcare and social assistant people are the most needed at this time of crisis. They are the people who help us, you know, sail through this crisis. And if they lose job, if as a society, you know, if we can't ensure that they are secured, their jobs are secured, then we are in trouble.
So what that means in general is an overinvestment in sectors of the economy that assume our well-being, and an underinvestment in institutions and parts of the economy that are supposed to provide that well-being.
Economic insecurity really refers to people losing their income. But economic insecurity can also be attributed to expense shocks, which in the context of the US, one of the biggest expense shocks that individuals or household face is medical bills. And so in a given month, if you lose your income or a portion of your income, or if you have one of these expense shocks, then it matters whether you have savings or whether you have wealth that you can tap into to weather these storms. And as a kind of recent news reports have shown, very few Americans do. So these shocks really can be catastrophic. And one of the ways that they can be is in terms of housing, right? And so this is particularly true for people who are renters because you can be evicted, you know, fairly quickly for not paying your rent. We know that within Maricopa County, the minimum wage is $12 an hour, but you need to make about $20 an hour to afford renting here. We also know within Maricopa County, kind of as a result of these influences, that we have a higher than the national average eviction rate. So about 3 times the national eviction rate. We've seen a huge rise in homelessness in Phoenix and in the county over the last couple of years.
And then we're seeing this pandemic also be disproportionately hard on communities of color, low-income communities, and those are our students.
The economic resilience dashboard is built on basic principles of data visualization, and it provides a snapshot of the Arizona's evolving economy, especially amidst the coronavirus pandemic. The unemployment insurance claims data comes every week. And if you look at the latest data that we have of end of August, and you would see about 60% of the claims are made by people who have studied up to grade 12. And you know, what percentage of people in Arizona who has studied up to 12? It's only 29.7%. We are looking at a picture where people with lower educational status are struggling to stay afloat amidst the crisis, to save their jobs. So we need to look at our educational system, and as universities, I guess it's our responsibility to look at this kind of data and make informed choices. Who are we educating, and how can we change our policies to sort of bring together a lot of larger section, so that in future we avert such situations.
I think that kind of the typical response is that we need to make education more accessible for people. And while I think that that is a worthy goal, and it's certainly a lot of good would come from that, I want to push back a little bit and thinking of that as being the solution.
My students need to work. They've got families at home. They've got to put food on the table. They're making basic skills necessity conversations about, am I paying the rent or am I buying milk for my kid? They need a job. They need an industry recognized credential. And then they need that employer that's got tuition reimbursement that's going to help them pay for their education.
So I think COVID has showed us, for instance, maybe some more than others, that we actually really like going out to eat at restaurants, and we need people that are cooks, and we need people that are waiters and waitresses, and we need people that are grocery store employees. And
they've been hailed as heroes in some sense because they've maintained the grocery stores, the pharmacies, the home goods, the technology stores, so that we can continue to, operate as a society, and they are exposed.
So all of these things that maybe aren't very stable and don't pay very well, we need people to fill those jobs. And so I would say that more than kind of lifting people out of those jobs, we need to value those jobs as what they're worth and pay the people doing them a wage that they're able to live on.
A couple of things that have been made possible through COVID are that several retail employers have increased their minimum wage. For example, Target just up their $15 per hour nationwide. Not all the retailers are responding with a higher minimum wage or increasing wages. Some of them are adding sick leave as a benefit, something that hardly was a given benefit in the sector.
There are these unpredictable events that occur in life that could affect any of us at any time. And so putting systems in place to help families and households and individuals weather those before they happen is a lot easier than ending up in a situation where we do have kind of mass insecurity and trying to cope with it after the fact.
What we're learning through the pandemic, and the calls for social justice is there's been, right under the surface, a lot of hidden inequity, I guess, right? And it doesn't take much, right, for that to surface. So the health pandemic is basically, exposing, how much of a thread there is on access to the healthcare system and equitable service there. We're seeing it in education as well.
So our work has, transitioned not necessarily just from the academic pieces that we're always working with them on, but the social and emotional wellness of our students, as well as access to unemployment benefits, food boxes, all of those basic needs. Those have really come to the forefront.
A lot of times when we talk about equity, people think about achievement gaps, right? And I would almost like to switch the onus of the terminology from being, not focusing on who's doing the achieving, the student, but talking about an obligation gap. And really it's the obligation of our campus culture to intentionally connect with students those services and resources they need to succeed.
A lot of the work that I do as well in the community is just raising awareness with the business community about what a high school equivalency is. There's a lot of people that ask, whether you got a GED or a high school diploma. There's no difference. There's students that we have that they didn't drop out because they don't have the mental ability to get their high school diploma. They dropped out because of substance abuse. They dropped out because they got pregnant. They dropped out because they were bullied at their high school for being LGBTQ. So there are a lot of reasons that students don't stay in a traditional education system.
And I think the other thing is just this concept of inclusivity. You know, I think that's a really important part of resilience.
My observation so far is that people are, in this time, people are willing to listen more because everyone realizes that it's a very unique situation. So I think that's a good thing. But it's also more challenging because I have found we are moving to consensus and a solid direction slower, but we're more thoughtful of sort of the process and bringing people along.
What do I see for the future? What's my hunch? My hunch, which is probably hunch/hope, is that when we return to what might be perceived as normal, we don't discontinue that. I really want to make sure that we are continuing to recognize and respect all cultures in all that we do.
And the most innovative discussions that I've been in have been where there's often sort of non-traditional stakeholders that build connections that you've never thought of. And so when I think about this idea of, you know, continuing to build resilience, I think you really can't or overemphasize the importance of being very inclusive in who is part of that conversation and what input they might have.
I think when it comes to the workforce, I look at the economic disparities. And I think at its core, it's because you have certain jobs and professions that have been historically held by certain groups. And it's not that people aren't capable of doing those jobs. You know, it's simply that they don't have a reference point and a point of encouragement to get into it.
I'm extremely concerned about the disproportionate impact that we've had locally on our opportunity youth population, which is defined as those between 16 and 24 that are out of school and out of work. Where we were hovering somewhere around 11 to 12% here in Maricopa County, those numbers have skyrocketed. And we've got opportunity youth in some pockets that are hovering close to 25, 30%.
I mean, so like if you look at it in the wake of COVID, you say, well, I mean, it's all young people who get fired because they're the ones that staff the tourism, hotel, and restaurant industry.
We're seeing that less and less companies are willing to take an intern because they don't have probably the means to pay for those hours for the teens. So I think it's an impact that we will see probably for a while here, but we're trying to get companies to see the brighter side, right? You are preparing a teen for either your company or another company. It's just preparing them for the workforce. Some of the issues that the companies have mentioned prior to 2020 was that they don't have the proper staff to be a mentor for the teens. For other companies, they said a lot of the teens are missing the soft skills. So that's when we came, and say, okay, we'll teach them the soft skills of work readiness and you can teach them the hard skills. Just give the opportunity to a teen. They have a lot to give, especially with technology. A lot of companies, they're lacking that, the marketing or the social media presence. So a lot of these teens have that, and they can help you grow your business.
Investing in the workforce of the future is going to continue to be super important for economic resilience.
Whether that's at a skill-based training level through a robust and excellent community college program, trades program, those skill-based entities and activities are critical for the rest of the economy to grow.
We launched a website during COVID that, folks that are either working in retail or have been affected by COVID and have been laid off, they can use the site to learn about different career paths and resources and opportunities.
Digitization of our society is imminent, and that's happening over the last couple of decades, and that's going to continue to happen. And with that comes a number of opportunities.
Technologies and having basic technology skills is something that adult ed has been focusing on nationally, and how we integrate technology into everything we do.
More and more, I think employees are going to need to have the digital needs, the technology needs, because again, the convergence of brick and mortar with e-commerce or the omni-channel as it's referred sometimes.
Even the frontline warehouse workers have, handheld computer devices. So our students need to know how to have those basic skills. And then we do in adult ed what we call integrated education and training. That's really about getting our students frontline technology, frontline industry recognized certificates while they're still in our program, so that when they do get their high school equivalency and they're moving out into the workforce, they're not only bringing that high school equivalency with them, but potentially bringing with them a credential.
I've been a motorcycle rider most of my life, and when you learn to ride a motorcycle, the first thing they tell you is look out 25 feet from where you are to where you want to go, because you will steer the motorcycle toward wherever you're looking.
And I'm a pilot. So one of the other things that my instructor taught me was always plan ahead of the airplane.
What you have to consider is all the other circumstances that might impact your target, and therefore you would make the proper adjustments with your aim.
If you are going to plan for today, then you'll always be playing a catch-up game.
You are always presented with both an obstacle and opportunity. And whichever one you search for is the one you will tend to find. For the longest time, I had many business owners wanting to get back to February 28th. That was their, the time where things were okay for them. And they were trying to get back to that place. And the truth is, you can never run a business backwards. You can only run forwards. So I was really working with them to help them understand, find a new target from where you stand. And what I'm finding is this wonderful willingness within the business community to help each other. And now what this is doing is it's causing them to be creative. It's causing them to be innovative. And that's creating a new excitement in their own business. And when a business is running on a foundation of excitement and passion and optimism, you tend to get really wonderful results for that business. And that's really what I see coming down the road.
Resilience still hasn't made its way broadly into the economic development dialogue for dozens or hundreds of years. The focus of development has been on progressing wages, progressing GDP, growing your city size. And it's really novel to interject into that conversation and say, oh, by the way, you may be decreasing your resilience as you do that. So maybe we should step back and think of a way to find this sweet spot where we could do both.
This pandemic should make us realize about how fragile we are and our planet is. And if this is not a wake-up call to figure out how we become a more responsible global citizen, I think that's shame on us.
When we think about investment in our well-being as citizens or as workers, it is impossible to avoid the idea that dealing with the climate crisis is part of that. Both the failure of our ability to respond to COVID and our failure to respond to climate change are both consequences of an assumption that we can spend our way out of problems, and that we can keep investing in these sectors of the economy that depend upon well-being but don't provide well-being. And as long as that's true, we will continue to have these kinds of problems.
The world is going to have to innovate. All of us who want to operate successfully as leaders within it are going to have to morph. We're going to have to become something different. We have to bring other people along. We have to redesign whole institutions of engagement with society. And that means we need to redesign ourselves a little bit as well.
What are the things that we are learning to do better, to do more efficiently, and in some cases, to stop doing?
So I think you're going to find people reimagining and redesigning exactly how we're going to interact with each other, how we're going to set policy with each other, how we're going to communicate with each other.
This has made us realize what our strengths and weaknesses are. And we are going to emerge out of this by the middle of 2021, a much more stronger nation.
I personally feel really excited about the future of the Phoenix metro area. I think we have a stronger foundation than we even did 10 years ago.
I think we have a really good chance of building a much better future than we were on track for before.
And I think we just need to keep working together to find those solutions to get us to that next level of resiliency, and making sure that, you know, everyone is brought along with that. I mean, it really has to be something for everyone, or we all suffer.
Hang in there. It may be difficult, but when we come out on the other side, we will find a way to appreciate the experience. We are going to be better from this. We're going to be better business owners. We're going to be better employers. We're going to be better employees. I think we're going to be better people. Just hang in there. It's worth it. Be resilient. That is the most important thing.